Hello everybody, I am Ben from Team Panic, and today we're going to be looking at how Annie Are You OK did at ARC's May meet. Now, we've just done a full upgrade to Annie Are You OK. There will be a link to that in the description down below. So we're going to jump straight on in to the first fight, and that is up against a robot called Double Smasher. This is driven by Nate, who is one of the youngest drivers in our league and has 2 overhead axe weapons. So going into this fight, I knew that this fight and my next fight were up against robots that couldn't really do a lot of damage to me, so I put on my big disc weapon to hopefully do as much damage as I possibly could to them.
3, 2, 1, go!
So that was an interesting fight, as it always is up against Nath. He obviously does his thing where he spins around quite a lot, which does make it hard to pinpoint a shot on him. I was also able, though, to get a lot of nice big hits, so much so that when he got high-sided and kind of high-centered in at one point, that was some of his front armor. There was a nice big curl of plastic ripped out by the disc that was too low and was forcing one of the wheels up off the ground, which kind of helped him get high-sided and allowed me to get that nice banking shot over into the pit, which was really cool. I will also say the YOLO drive was a little bit twitchy, so I ended up, after this fight, I went through and changed the rates in my controller so that I was no longer able to get full forwards, backwards, left and right out of the controller because, yeah, during this fight I was driving forwards and I would touch the controller just a little bit and Annie would like spin 90 degrees. So yeah, I was having a little bit of trouble with that control. So turning all my rates down did seem to help a little bit going into the next few fights. And obviously we won that one because Double Smasher went in the pits. So next up it is Dozer, which is a very tanky robot that looks like a 6-wheel drive but is instead a 2-wheel drive. The last couple of times we have fought them, we have done significant damage to that front panel, including the one that I've got up on my shelf here, which we ripped off the robot entirely last year.
3, 2, 1, go!
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So, the new weapon height on Annie is doing wonders here. So, this new design has the weapon a lot lower to the ground. In fact, I would say it's the lowest to the ground this weapon has ever been. So much so that we got in underneath the nice armored front of Dozer and into those standoff wheels that keep the whole robot balanced. Those things are just a 3D print, and they're 3D printed with about a 15% infill by the looks of things. So the first couple of shots we got on those, they exploded everywhere through the arena, which is what all of that plastic shrapnel is around the place. With those kind of breaking and or broken, the whole front wedge hit the ground, and we actually took some chunks out of that further at that point. He did say after the fight that he normally, or now, he bends the armor in at the sides, basically to stop me catching the edges of it and ripping it open, which is what I did with this one. And what happened instead was that I bent one further into the chassis and I bent the other one back to straight, basically. It's also interesting to note that on this image of the armor panel, you can see where the old damage is from Annie in the last fight, and then, or the last month's meets, and then you can see where the new damage is from Annie in this month's meets, where we'd taken out those wheels, the panel had dropped to the ground, and we're slicing it right along the bottom, which was really, really cool to see. So you can kind of see that height differential, even though, like I said, it's a little bit of a lie, because yeah, when we're actually hitting that panel, it was when the panel was on the ground. Speaking of, that is how we won this fight. That panel hit the ground. He got then high centered, I think, on a little bit of his own wheel, and also the fact that that panel was on the ground and really not letting him move too far. Yeah, so Annie doing pretty well so far. However, I will say right at the end there, I did have some slight drive issues out of Annie. I took her back into the pits and pulled some stuff apart and found that there was a tiny little piece of swarf left over in the arena from an Iron Tooth Beetle Griffin fight which had happened earlier, that had got up into the motors, and because these are a YOLO drive and the motors are fairly exposed, yeah, tiny little piece of swarf up in there that had jammed that motor up, and yeah, wasn't good for Annie realistically, but that is just the problem you face with the YOLO drive system. Next up, we have Super Mousy. Super Mousy is a tanky wedge. It is literally the old school cheese wedge style design with just super thick HDPE everywhere.
3, 2, 1, go!
That was unfortunate. I was having some drive issue with Annie in the first little bit of that fight. Her drive system seems to have a hitch in it where if you spin the wheel, it spins totally fine, but if you spin and then try and go back the other way, it will hitch from time to time. And it's just a little bit, but when it does, like, there you go, that's hitched. Now, it takes a bit of force to overcome, and it means that changing direction really quickly on the stick kind of got difficult. And I'm not really 100% sure how this happened, but I was having that issue to start with, hit the wedge, flipped upside down. Now I'm having drive issues with the motors, or at least one motor, and I'm having issues because I'm upside down, which is not all that useful, especially as I don't have a switch yet on my controller that allows me to toggle an invert system. I really do need that because Annie and others of my robots end up upside down all the time, but I just haven't got there yet. So I was having trouble with that. Also, it turns out the new design of Annie sitting upside down with this particular weapon on, she's not perfectly balanced like that and tends to kind of tilt and teeter forwards. So I was hitting the ground a lot. Yeah, basically this fight, once I was upside down and couldn't get back over, I was always gonna end up the way it ended up, as a loss. So we've got 2 wins and a loss, and next up we are fighting Beta Griffin. Now, Beta Griffin is always an interesting one for me to fight with Annie. The first couple of fights that we had between Annie and Beta Griffin were 3-minute slugfests, just pure destruction, and they were just amazing. Since then, we've been having this point where both robots are getting so powerful that normally the fight is decided in one big hit.
2, 1, go!
So, still having those motor issues with Annie where the hitching is happening and she's just not driving quite properly. And I mean, you can tell that I was still having those issues because I'm still having those issues even now sitting here after the event doing this recap. I will say after this particular fight, I did sit down and find out that the motor shafts had pushed into Annie. So I actually pushed them back out a little bit to push them back out through the cans and hopefully kind of stabilize everything up. We'll see how that goes in the next fight. However, this particular fight was having those drive issues, and that did allow Beta Griffin to get around the back of Annie a couple of times, and there's some nice big nicks in the back of Annie now. But the fact that we changed up Annie's whole system so that the weapon now sits out the back actually helped us in this case, because he wasn't really able to get a good push on us from the back because we got a nice big hit while he was attempting to do that, which I really like this system. So Annie is going to stay with some level of damage range out the back of her, I think, forever from this point onwards, because that was quite nice. Speaking of quite nice though, we then turned around and gave him a big old hit and he ended up upside down. And he got stuck in that upside down position. He seems to be a bit kind of back and forth on as to whether or not Beta Griffin can actually drive upside down. Some iterations of it can and some iterations of it can't. And I think it also does depend a little bit on how much damage he's taken during the day. He'd had fought Iron Tooth earlier in the day, so he'd taken a fair amount of damage up until this point, and yeah, he got stuck upside down, which is a problem for him, but it worked out well for us because by this same point in the fight, the wheels locking up was becoming a big issue for us. So yeah, we're very, very lucky that he got stuck where he did and gave us the win. Moving on, we have Blood Spot, which is different to Blood Sport. Blood Sport obviously being the BattleBot, going over to BattleBots. Blood Spot being a very similar design to Super Mousy, in actual fact built by the same family team, Team Fuzz.
3, 2, 1, go!
Chopper's coming into land.
So this was a worrying fight for me because I was getting some kind of brownout or over temperature issue or something. The weapon stopped on its own a couple of times in this fight and I really don't know what that was. Annie had a new battery in her. I'd actually taken 2 batteries to the event and I was just powering, like charging them while one was in the robot and like swapping them after every fight. So she should have been good to go. They should have had no issues. She was running all the same gear that she'd been running in previous fights, and yet I'm getting these power out issues where the motor, the weapon motor just dies. I think it might be a combination of having both motors hitch at the same time and having the weapon running, basically drawing way too much current out of the battery, and yeah, everything just kind of like powers down. So this wasn't a fun fight because I was dealing with all of that the whole way through and not really focusing on what Bloodspot was doing. They got some good pushes in, obviously, because I wasn't all that focused on what they were doing. And yeah, thankfully in the end we did manage to get them in the pit. We did do a fair amount of damage to Bloodspot. As I mentioned, they are a very similar design to Super Mousy. Those 2 robots have been running for over a year and a half now, and haven't had any real maintenance done to them because they are just thick blocks of HDPE. And we actually did the first amount of damage that needs to be repaired, peeling off the side armor of Bloodspot there, which that's really cool. I like the fact that Annie can do that, especially considering that's done with this weapon, which is the single tooth disc, which doesn't actually pack as much of a punch as the, sorry, this is a single tooth bar. It doesn't pack as much punch as the disc. So yeah, if we'd put the disc on, we probably could have hit even harder again. And someday we will indeed put the disc on for a fight against Bloodspot. Anyway, final fight of the day, we have Iron Tooth. Iron Tooth is the big, nasty horizontal spinner out of ARC. It's the reason that Annie Are You OK runs a 10mm thick HDPE front armor, because anything else is just not sufficient.
3, 2, 1, go!
Oh boy, so that was a fight. Yeah, Iron Tooth hits like a truck and has way more reach than Annie does. So every single hit that we go in for, what I need to do against Iron Tooth is take the hit, force the separation, and then dive immediately back across the arena to get back in range and get my weapon into a wheel or something along those lines. However, that wasn't what was happening here because, of course, the drive issues were still a thing. Only compounded by the fact that Iron Tooth straight up hit one of the wheels wholesale and has killed it. Like, this does not move. Well, okay, it does move, but very, very barely. And the whole can is separated. Everything is bad. It's just bad. Thankfully though, during that hit, he did kill our motor, but he then also flipped himself over and got high-sided on one of his own bolts. So he was kind of stuck in that top corner. I was able to crab walk on the one mostly working motor because at this point it was still kind of hitchy, but it was enough for me to be able to crab walk over to him. And as I got closer, he decided to call the fight rather than have another engagement, especially as his weapon seems to have gone down. I'm not sure if it did actually go down or if he turned it off trying to not have it hit the walls or something while he was getting out of that situation. I don't know. But what I do know is that we got the win for that. So out of 6 fights, we lost one of those, and we lost that one because the drive was terrible and we were upside down for most of it. So in the end, we actually won the Beetle weights for ARC's main meet, which I am blown away by, especially considering how much of an issue I had with this drive system over the weekend. It was a pain. It was a real pain. So I have a choice to make with this drive system because I can either sit down and basically change these motors over every single meet because these had gone through one meet totally fine and then the second meet they went through not fine at all. So I can either change these brushless motors over every single meet, which gets expensive very quickly, or I can go back to the drawing board and find a new system to run Annie on, which I don't really want to do that. I've just done a whole new system, but that might be the way to go ahead here. We might need to do a damage breakdown of Annie too, because I've just lifted Annie up and realized that in the Iron Tooth fight, this whole front armor here has been bent up away from the chassis. So that's a thing. That's more damage than I was expecting. So maybe in the near future we will have an Annie breakdown live stream. If you're not subscribed and want to see that, subscribe and keep your eye out because I will post something in advance to make sure you guys know when that's going to happen. But yeah, we'll do an Annie teardown live stream for sure. Get her pulled down to her bare parts and see just how much damage actually happened here because it seems like more than I realized. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed that one and I will see you in the next video.